All right. We're going to have a quick round of introductions. So who you are and what you do.
My name is Jon Radoff. I'm founder and CEO of Beamable. So my background is a weird combo of development tools. Took a company public once in web development tools, and then went from that to doing game development, shipped games based on big TV shows, so Star Trek and Game of Thrones and Walking Dead, shipped games to 20 million players. And so I've decided to kind of smush all that together at Beamable and help people with the back-end infrastructure needs they have in games. So games, $200 billion industry, people are spending tens of billions on back-end infrastructure, and we're building a DePIN for that.
Yeah, do you hear me? Is this on? Yeah, awesome. So you just saw my presentation. Sure? It's not working? Oh, yeah, right, okay. So yeah, you just saw my presentation. Besides that, so by education, I'm an engineer. I have co-founded a few other companies, but my heart is in energy. And yeah.
Who doesn't love energy, right?
A lot of people. It's very boring.
Really? We can see what happens in Portugal and Spain, right?
My kids fall asleep when I talk about it.
Okay. Oh, that's one benefit, right? So I'm Christian Killer. Don't be afraid of the name. That's my running joke. It's just a Swiss name, so nothing special about it. Head of research from Accurist. I've been with the team ever since the beginning because I finished my PhD in blockchain voting, and I essentially met Alessandro. I've known him for many years. We've worked together on Bitcoin NFC wallets in 2013. And he was like, hey, we're building Accurist. And I was super convinced by the idea because I realized we don't have the infrastructure to actually decentralize a voting system properly. We will have to use servers with HSMs from some proprietary providers, which sucks. So that's why we're building Accurist, a decentralized serverless cloud.
All right. Thank you so much for the introductions. So we've had a traditional problem in crypto that most of the protocols and networks out there aren't really used. But yeah, from traditional investing, we know that for a technology to be adopted, to be used, it's got to be better, cheaper, faster by somehow an order of magnitude. So I'm going to start asking you guys, how does each of you operate in a business that is better or cheaper or faster or even like all three of them? And can you give some examples? Christian, let's start with you.
I'm glad we published a paper on performance because otherwise I wouldn't have an answer right now. Just joking. So we basically analyzed cloudless functions performance versus Accurist. And not to our surprise, of course, it was much faster than GCP, AWS, and Azure Cloud. So at the end of the day, we are able to perform better also on the performance side with mobile phones, which most people wouldn't expect. But at the end of the day, a lot of clouds have like older hardware that is not ARM based, for example, and other issues, of course, if you cannot get the compute from the edge. So that's one thing that we can do, of course, and we can also add on top of that confidentiality, privacy, and decentralization by design. So, yeah.
Speed is essential in energy markets. So we have seen a phenomena coming up in the recent years of blackouts. So we've seen one blackout in Chile, in Spain, in Lisbon. I live in both countries, in Chile and in Lisbon. So we had two blackouts in 2 months kind of distance. And the reason is there is a centralized coordinator of the balancing market, which is balancing the frequencies. And if this entity doesn't perform, we have a blackout. And so with the technology that we have built in Digital Spine in Australia, it's actually possible to build localized balancing markets, which means the grid becomes by far more efficient because you can compartmentalize the grid. And that is just a higher resilience. That wasn't possible before because there was communication protocols, how to communicate in the market. But again, everyone had to build their own software for that, which we now call virtual power plants. But by externalizing this software into centralized coordination, we can scale the markets and build localized balancing markets, which means that speed increase enables that we don't have blackouts. Yeah.
See if this works. Yeah, it does work now. So there's a few different ways we can think about this problem. One is for the game market generally, but also the DePIN market specifically. So I'm actually going to start with the latter because it's very important to how I'll explain the game industry to you. So in crypto, when we talk about games, often the focus is on Web3 games. And in fact, we have a lot of big Web3 game companies, Mythical Games, who have been here as really amazing publisher that's built on our platform. However, most of our traffic is actually Web 2. That's what's really interesting, I think, about DePIN generally, which is DePIN has the ability to access the currently much more vast markets that exist in Web 2. So I was describing earlier the size of the gaming industry. It's about a $200 billion a year industry that spends tens of billions on network infrastructure to support it. Web3 gaming is still a very, very small niche industry, one that may in fact grow and get much, much larger over time, but all of these other Web2 games, they're not going away, all right? So that's one thing that's just really interesting to recognize first, which is DePIN is a really compelling market that addresses these traditional markets using the advantages of Web3 technology, such as the ability to do transparent order books and aligning incentives and a more capital efficient mechanism for building up community ownership. Okay, so what specifically in games? So right now, most game companies are highly dependent on the hyperscalers, Amazon, Azure, GCP primarily. And if you look at the world of what's called bare metal service providers, frequently the cost of bandwidth is 10% what they're paying to the hyperscalers. Frequently, the cost of servers is on the order of 70% less than what you're paying to the hyperscalers. So right out of the gate, there's a really significant economic advantage to switching to an open network in which the service providers are essentially offering their services into an order book as opposed to the hyperscaler business model, which is more about lock-in. Okay. In addition to that, though, the thing that the game industry has really never had for the back end is a true ecosystem for developers. So one of the things that I also think is compelling about DePIN is that once you've got this infrastructure in place to do essentially settlement and payments for capacity provisioning, you can also use that same settlement network for software that you're running on the network, and you get to a point of standardization and interoperability around how all this software works with each other. So that has the benefit of accelerating the development process for games. And if there's anybody who knows anything about games in this room, I bet you that you've seen a lot of games spend a lot of money and a lot of time on things that their player did not care about. And guess what? The player does not care about where your servers live until they break, right? Then they care a lot. But you really just need to focus on the fun when it's games. And we're trying to build a network where you can shift your capital and time towards that.
Maybe just to add another crazy number, because I haven't thought about it before, but in our work, during our work with the regulator in Australia, with this software, with the digital spine that we implemented there, we figured out we can increase the efficiency of the market by 40%. 40%. You know, there is an ever-driving need for energy, and now purely through software, you can drive 40% more efficient, which is crazy. You know, so this is only possible through decentralized coordination.
I think Christian wants to add something on the cheaper side.
Thank you so much. Just added the mic and you got the cue. So I can also add to that number. So performance per watt is also manifold more efficient in phones and ARM-based architectures. So if we switch to upcycling of phones and using phones in compute, we can also save a lot of energy as well. So
and new phones can actually contribute to our worker nodes.
Yes, perfect. Let's do it.
One other thing I'd add is also just the ability to mitigate centralized risks. We haven't talked about that too much either. But so again, I'll look at the game industry. So Amazon had a product called GameSparks, and GameSparks had about 2,000 games on it. Well, one day an executive at Amazon looked at GameSparks and they're like, get rid of that, not enough profit margin in it, or whatever the decision was. They basically shut down 2,000 games. So this was a central dependency that put a whole bunch of people out of business. So DePIN also allows you to have many more stakeholders present in the network, so that if anyone decides to leave the network, that's fine. They can choose to get out of the network if they can't offer services profitably enough, but you've got the rest of the network intact. So the sales pitch we have to game developers is the first two that I provided, but also you no longer have to bet your entire future on what one entity decides to do. And that's a very unique aspect of blockchain and decentralized technology.
All right, so we've seen the benefits of building and using DePIN infrastructure, but traditionally in crypto we've had a lot of founders saying, okay, we're going to build it, and then the users will come afterwards. So the question for you guys is, who are your users? Jon, I will start with you because it's quite straightforward, but for the audience, who do you build for?
Yeah, this is a problem in crypto and even DePIN specifically. Like, there's always these aspirational things where you're going to build it and someday people will use it. With us, we started with a technology stack that we sold to game developers, and we made sure that we had product market fit on it. So today we have over 100 games that have launched already that are on the platform. That translates to 2 billion, multiple billions, actually 7, 8 billion API calls per month. So a lot of actual utilization on the network from these games. And as we transition away from the original software architecture, which was SaaS, on centralized providers like Amazon, towards a decentralized network, because we have those relationships in place with game developers already, we can reroute that traffic to wherever we think is best for those customers. It's not like they're hosting it for themselves already. So I really urge DePIN developers and teams to really crystallize those product market fit use cases and try to sign up actual on the demand side. Like, there's been a big emphasis on signing up the supply side. It's not easy to get the supply side either, but it's really, really hard to sign up the demand side, because then you actually have to get people to buy into exactly what kind of problem you're solving. And we've basically spent the last 5 years on the demand side.
For us, it's very simple. I mean, our clients are part of our consortium. So our clients is regulators, large consortium, policymakers, and we build solutions together with them. We analyze the business process, and we just put a decentralized business logic inside. So our clients actually made the solution. It wasn't us. Yeah.
Christian, who's using Acrorast?
Yes, so essentially Acrorast also was inceptioned by the demand of a serverless oracle that you can just fetch any on-demand price, for example, for gold. So that's how we started out. And so the demand was there from the beginning, and it grew just from there. And we realized we can generalize the compute and use also the storage and the bandwidth. So who's using it? Also, we can use it for web crawling a lot. So that's also demand spike, I would say. And general compute, like hosting websites, inference of LLMs. So there's anything you can do on a server, you can also do with Acrorast, right? Almost anything, depending on the capping of the individual device by now. But we will introduce clustering of multiple phones. So after that, the limits are a bit higher. And also on the supply side, I don't disagree with you, but I think it's quite hard to actually also grow the supply side, because a lot of projects say they have the supply, but it's hard to verify, right? So at the end of the day, with us, it's possible to verify, because we have these devices that cannot be tampered with or faked, because we have the attestations. So I think, even though it might sound simple, it's actually not that easy to have a verifiable supply side.
Yeah, you brought up actually two great points. So the first one is building up the supply, and then the second is actually being able to verify that supply. So maybe on the first point, on the building up of the supply. So traditionally we've had DePIN networks that used token incentives to give away to the community, to give away to the nodes, to be able to actually issue a service on the network. And we've seen that, especially with the older generation of DePINs, that there were quite a lot of rewards coming out of token incentives. Nowadays, we've seen also some other projects that do not really rely on a token, but they rely much more on the demand, on the organic demand coming from the market. So the question for each of you is, do you still see the important role of the token? And what is the most important use of the token for each of your projects? Maybe Jon, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, the token is absolutely essential to DePIN for a bunch of reasons. I mean, number one, just from a capital formation standpoint, physical infrastructure and things like servers can cost hundreds of millions, if not billions, to build and scale up over time. So a community ownership model that's token incentivized is just a much more capital efficient method relative to the other two main ones, which would be raising equity financing or just having a bunch of cash that you can incentivize people with. So token incentives are highly effective for that. But ultimately, you're building a community network, and in some ways it's comparable to what you see in open source, but unlike open source, it has this added complexity of you're consuming real resources at scale. Like if you're a game, in our case, that has millions of players, there's substantial compute to service the needs of millions of players playing a game, and that means that you have to have an alignment of incentives between all of the participants in that network, certainly the people who are providing capacity, certainly the people who are verifying that everyone's playing fair in the network, what we call validator nodes on our network. Certainly any people that add more software to the ecosystem that delivers solutions to game developers, they're another stakeholder. So tokens are just really good at that, and then it opens up other options like governance and things like that. I mean, we basically use our token as the mechanism of payment. Like if you want me to stack rank, like what's the main use? It's a payment mechanism on the network for utilizing network traffic, and that's everything from paying for services to it can actually be used as an incentive itself, not only for the supply side to get them to join the network, but the demand side too. Like Amazon typically brings people on board with network credits. Well, the token can be used to do that actually in a very capital efficient way on the demand side to get people to switch over. So payment and incentive to set up nodes and be a participant.
On the incentive side, to set up nodes, we've seen also recently that loans have become more and more of an option, and that substitutes somehow the incentivization through tokens. Have you experienced that? Have you been looking into accessing loans instead of giving away tokens to the community or to the nodes?
Well, that's an interesting idea, and I should say that we're kind of looking at Q4 for our token launch, so it's not live yet, and we'll probably look at that. One of the things we look at, though, is locking token incentives so that when we want to give it to someone as a node operator, or in this case, a game who wants to participate in the network, if we're going to incentivize them, it's for the purpose of using the network. It's not, here's some tokens, and then they turn around and sell it and pocket some cash and do something else. No, it's tokens that you're going to use to actually utilize network traffic on the network. So I don't know if that sort of fills the same use case as loans, but I guess it's a grant, so to speak, from us that cannot be sold. It can only be used for the intent that it originally had.
In our case, the token is part of the solution. So let's say, because the worker nodes concept is essentially like, so if I have compute and I have money, and I want to utilize it, then I can contribute actually to the solution by contributing compute and the stake with money on it. And because that's important, because otherwise, if I only contribute compute, how could they even put the logic on my compute? Because I could just do whatever I want. So I need to have some form of kind of liability, And this is the token. It's part of the work that you put on it. If you do wrong work, you lose your money. And so in our case, the utility is really is part of the work that you provide the logic execution.
One pushback here is you mentioned the token is a utility token or a work token, and we've seen that in the past that most of the utility tokens have lost their value, some of their value over time. How do you account for that, in the long term for the token holders, that the value is not getting eroded over time?
Yeah, I mean, so look, there's a lot of examples for that. So when we launched, and we launched so long time ago by crypto time standards, that there wasn't much token utility that was accessible at at them. It was just paying for the gas fees for the chain, for using the chain. And that was essentially the token economics of Ethereum as well. So, and as we iterated through all the proof of concepts with the corporates and with all the clients, and we realized what is the real utility we can provide from the network, that's how we baked in the token then. And so I think the future token valuations, and we see this developing in the recent years, is obviously, the panel of investors was very interesting to see that, is the notion of on-chain revenue. And so you have a limited supply of tokens and you have on-chain revenue, which is the incentive to use the token. And so the valuations will be pretty much driven by on-chain revenue. That is my assumption. Before, we didn't have that notion. On-chain revenue didn't exist until, 1.5, 2 years ago? This notion even of on-chain revenue didn't exist. And now we're going there, so...
I can confirm that. In my research, it has been very difficult to actually track the revenue of DePINs, and some of them have private revenues that they self-declare, and it is all the time a very good practice whenever
I must say,
having DePINs.
Your research was very inspiring to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are already publishing network stats on the beamable.network website, so you can see things like network utilization, and we're committed to continuing that when the protocol goes live, including things like verifiable on-chain revenue. And that's just central to DePIN. Like, I would think that has to be there. I mean, to go back to your earlier question, though, like, value accrual of the token will largely come as a function of decreasing circulating supply over time. We haven't actually made the final decision of whether we're going to decrease the circulating supply through a burn mechanism or just withdraw it to the foundation treasury or some combination thereof, but some small network tax for native token usage and a somewhat higher tax for stablecoin usage, because we believe there's a lot of customers who want to pay in stablecoin as well. That then reduces the circulating supply of token, and the token ultimately represents a GDP of activity, so to speak, of transactions on the network, and you have fewer and fewer tokens over time.
Well, what are you going to do with the tax? So you collect the tax, but what do you do with it?
Well, for the portion that we don't burn, which we would keep, we would probably keep in treasury and use for grants and things like that to incentivize people to come back to the network if we needed to do that, and ecosystem development. Primarily ecosystem is the way we think of it.
Christian, token for Accurate?
I think just from a software architect point of view, it's always good to ask, do I really need a token, and then try to remove it. And if everything falls apart, then you probably need it, right? So I think it's a very good mechanism to organize all of the things that the gentleman already mentioned, like governance, burn mechanisms, treasury management. I think it's really hard to do that without a token, especially also the allocation of capital, as you mentioned. It's just much more efficient to sort of crowdsource certain things. So I think it's absolutely central, especially in DePIN, because, as you mentioned, on-chain revenue, etc., all these mechanisms are chained together, and without a token, it would be very complex. Yeah.
I mean, I think there is a very hard reason why you actually need a token, because if you want to create a framework that is decentralized, that is truly decentralized, and so if you create a startup like we did, a foundation, it should be our goal to create a framework that is widely used by the industry, that is useful to the industry, but that the industry is not reliant on us. And so there is obviously many mechanisms how you can, make the token economics better. And a lot of DePIN projects, they take their revenues and they buy back tokens. But that doesn't solve the problems because there is one entity buying back the tokens, reducing the supply of tokens and hopefully increasing the demand of the product. I think it is a much more honest and decentralized way to enable the solution builders to go the payments directly from the users to those who contribute the compute and kind of the decentralized business logic execution. Because that gives us a way, as a foundation who initiated that, not to be in the way. And so that's therefore kind of, I would always rather tend to the decision to the decision how to design the protocol. How does it make us less relevant? Because us being relevant in the network makes the network less decentralized, attackable, you know?
I think you brought up a great point on the payment side and on using the token as a mean to collect those payments.
On
Christian?
the other side, if something is too decentralized, it becomes very attackable, right? So it's very hard to reach that critical mass until you can reach that point. I agree completely with you. That would also be idealistically my point of view. But I think if you're like rather small.
No, I fully agree. I fully agree. You can't. It's a learning process. You know, it's a path. You know, you don't start with full decentralization, and yeah.
I think we'll reach it.
I think it's just a really helpful model, though, to have some flow of tokens back to the foundation treasury, because when you combine that with governance systems, it allows the people with the greatest stake in that network to make decisions about how that capital is essentially redeployed in the form of network improvements and things like that. So I think you have to kind of think of those together rather than in isolation.
Yeah, I mean, look, every founder in the crypto space that I know that have started their startups, I don't know, a long time ago, 8 years or 10 years ago, every founder suffers the same problem. That's why there is even a saying in kind of in our industry, networks should not have charismatic leaders, because they drive it and then the people listen to them. And then they're motivated by them to build, to join this project. But eventually they suffer the problem that they listen too much to them because they eventually want to disappear and they don't want to have influence to this. And so we see this like in Ethereum, there is no formal process, but Vitalik is a very big opinion maker. If he says something, a lot of people follow him, but it's at the same time a problem for him. And that's the same in all the networks, you know, where yes, you need a leader, but it's very dangerous because it makes the whole thing attackable. And so it's a gradual process to go into decentralization, but every tool, every upgrade should push into this direction. Yeah.
All right, you brought up decentralization, and Christian was thinking about progressive decentralization and how to achieve that. And I think there is a case to be made for DePINs that, in the case of DePINs, the decentralized nature of the technology offers potential primitives for actually having the compute done in a trustless and verifiable way. And I'd like to ask each of you to what extent your protocol or your project is checking the validity of the compute or of the DePIN service that it offers in each of the verticals that you're guys in. Maybe Christian, would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, we have like two parts. We have the chain that is proof of stake, delegated proof of stake. So that's one part that needs validity, right? And on the compute side, we essentially have the attestations of the hardware manufacturers, and we can then verify first bootstrap the trusted execution environment inside of these smartphones and mobile devices, and then also verify the signatures, right? And also do end-to-end encryption, which makes the whole process then end-to-end verifiable. This is the TE-based approach, but of course you can also extend it every path of the way. Like you could also extend it with zero-knowledge proof-based cryptography or redundant execution as well, if you don't trust one manufacturer. So I looked at zero-knowledge proof cryptography for 4 years, and I just had to realize that if you want to build something pragmatically for the real world, then it's not prime time for all the use cases, right? So if you want to build something purposeful or like purpose specific, then it makes a lot of sense. But if you want to do something generic, I think TE-based stuff is very reasonable, especially. Yeah.
Okay, so T stands for Trusted Execution
Thank you.
Environment. What are some other techniques or some other methods that you guys use?
I mean, also reputation-based metrics. So, for example, it's quite important that if you select a processor, which is a phone in our network, that it doesn't go down the next 10 minutes, right? So you need some sort of reputation that is also linked to the stake of the participant, for example. So you can daisy chain everything together again with the token, right? And then you have much more economic security tied to the consensus security, which then again is tied to the execution security, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, to extend that a little bit more, one of the things that we're working towards, not in the first version of the protocol that launches in Q4, but maybe a little next year, is what we're calling on-chain SLAs. So the big problem at DePIN generally is that you're almost always dealing with off-chain compute and on-chain settlement and verification, essentially, and sort of bridging those two things is complicated. In something like game servers, where they need to be extremely reliable, like 99.99% is like the minimum level of performance that you can actually have in this industry, it becomes really important to be able to verify not only the compute, but that they're available for compute at any given time, and that records are kept of whether you went offline so that people can see for all of the nodes in the network what is their actual performance history, so that before you deploy workloads there, our router nodes, which are another of the 3 node types we have, are able to look at quality of service, and that accounts for things like proximity, the reputation, as Christian was describing it, in our case, SLA history, and price are sort of the key things that factor into whether you're going to route a workload to a particular container.
So, John, you made the point of off-chain compute and on-chain verifiability. So the question for you, Ed, is what happens off-chain and what happens on-chain? Energy Web.
Yeah, so I mean, a worker node setup is basically a trusted execution environment with a stake inside, because they contribute, but then the result of that goes on chain. Yeah, because the worker node concept itself is actually mimicking a chain. It's like, you know, there's several people that do the same work with a stake, and so the majority is right, and that result goes on the chain. And so it's funny that because we go exactly into the same direction, we call it decentralized SLA for the direct payment. You call it on-chain SLA. So I also think that's the next big frontier that we're going to see, because we have SLAs, but we want to split away the payment of fiat into the worker nodes away from this SLA, because it's a separate work that we can't guarantee. It's not part of our work. And so this is actually a lot of the research we're now doing, how to design that.
All right, you've heard it here first. So it's a decentralized SLAs, the next frontier.
Service level agreement, that's generally kind of an agreement. If you use Amazon cloud services, you basically, you sign a service level agreement, and so that's SLA. So.
All right, a service level agreement for giving a service to the user, but at the same time you're a business, so you want to make money. And the question from my side is, how do you monetize? How do you make money? What is the business model behind, and who pays you? John?
Well, for us, it's kind of easy. Games need servers, and games are what pay for it. So game studios, game publishers that launch games who would normally be paying Amazon, GCP, or Azure primarily are paying the network. One of the nuances worth mentioning, though, too, is I think, again, DePIN has this opportunity to go after a largely Web 2 clientele, which means fiat gateways into the network are also really important. So part of what Beamable is building, like if you go to beamable.com, you're not going to see a lot of blockchain stuff there. You're going to learn about how amazing the network is and who our network partners are and things like that. But if you want to swipe the credit card and just pay for network utilization and not have to know anything about blockchain, that's fully enabled if you go there. If you're crypto native, you're totally welcome just to go at a protocol level and, you know, talk Web3 and provision things without going through a fiat gateway. Or for that matter, you can build against our protocol and we can have other fiat gateway. Like, we'd be delighted if other people who are specialists in different facets of the game industry just build their own gateways into it. So solving a lot of the payment rails and the simplicity for this Web 2 audience, I think, is going to be really, really critical going forward.
So Energy Web Foundation has been funding itself. Initially, 8 years ago at the beginning, all the corporates that joined, they paid a one-time fee. And so it was, all the corporates paid 250,000, and it was for education and jointly figuring out, creating those specifications and building the applications. So we raised 24 million, and that has been used to facilitate those, building those proof of concepts. Then as we launched the chain after 4 years, the token was issued, and we transformed the foundation into a membership model. And so all the members, they paid a yearly membership, and then also a lot of the consortiums, they basically chipped in if they wanted to build the solution. And so our team, we have a lot of developers in our team, we were paid for software development. And now what is happening now is we basically, the foundation sits on tokens, and we're staking the tokens in the system. So we're contributing with our tokens ourselves to the solutions and participating in the on-chain revenue. That's the simple business model.
Yeah, similar for us. We have like B2B deals where people need SLAs. So we can also support them directly with integrations, etc. But on the other side, of course, the B2C thing is that essentially we have a burn mechanism also embedded in the protocol. And then it goes towards the whole treasury flywheel, as most DePINs do as well, just to keep it short.
All right, last question. I want from each of you one word. What gets you excited in DePIN moving forward? Who wants to start?
Just one word. Real world adoption.
Ed?
On-chain revenue.
I can't do one word, but I think DePIN is the killer category. So I'll go killer.
I agree.
Bow to your name.
I agree.
It's the killer category for crypto generally because it has so much direct applicability to these real-world problems. And it's just essentially just take compute and get paid a token for it. That's what Bitcoin was.
Exactly.
Yeah, for me, it's valuations, is the relatively low valuations of DePINs. If you want to hear more about that, come and talk to us. And thank you so much for all your attention.
Thanks.
And for the panelists.
Thank you.